Genesis chapters 19 and 20 tell a powerful story. These chapters are a vivid depiction of divine intervention in human affairs, showcasing the delicate balance between judgment and mercy. It's about God's judgment and mercy. The narrative unfolds in the ancient cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, places that had become synonymous with sin and moral decay. It takes place in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. These cities were known for their opulence and indulgence, but beneath the surface they were rife with corruption and vice. These cities were full of wickedness. The inhabitants engaged in acts that were abhorrent to God, turning their backs on righteousness and embracing a life of sin. The people there had turned away from God. Despite numerous warnings and opportunities to repent, they continued in their ways, ignoring the divine messages sent to them. They did not listen to his warnings. Their hearts were hardened, and they mocked the messengers who tried to guide them back to the path of righteousness. Abraham, a man of faith, lived nearby. He was deeply concerned about the fate of these cities and their inhabitants. God had promised Abraham a great nation. This promise was a testament to Abraham's unwavering faith and his special relationship with God. God also promised to bless those who blessed Abraham. This covenant extended to all who supported and honored Abraham and his descendants. He would curse those who cursed him. This divine protection underscored the seriousness of God's promises and the importance of Abraham's lineage. Lot, Abraham's nephew, lived in Sodom. Despite the city's pervasive wickedness, Lot remained a righteous man, striving to live a life pleasing to God. He was a righteous man. His presence in Sodom was a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest places there can be light. But he lived among wicked people. The environment around him was hostile to his values and beliefs, making his righteous stance all the more challenging. This put him and his family in a dangerous situation. They were constantly at risk, surrounded by those who had no regard for God's laws. The stage is set for a dramatic confrontation between good and evil. The tension between righteousness and wickedness was reaching its peak. God's patience had worn thin. The time for judgment was at hand, and the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were about to face divine retribution. He was about to judge Sodom and Gomorrah. The impending destruction was a stark reminder of the consequences of turning away from God, but he would also show mercy to Lot and his family. Despite the widespread judgment, God's compassion for the righteous would shine through, offering a path to salvation for those who remained faithful. Two angels arrived in Sodom at sunset. They looked like men. Lot was sitting at the city gate. He saw them and showed them hospitality. He urged them to stay at his house. Lot knew the dangers of Sodom. He feared for the safety of his guests. He offered them food and a place to sleep. Lot's actions were a test of his character. Would he be kind to strangers, even in a wicked city? The men of Sodom, however, showed their true nature. They surrounded Lot's house. The men demanded that Lot hand over his guests. They wanted to harm them. Lot refused. He protected his guests, even though they were strangers. The men of Sodom were filled with wickedness. They were violent and disrespectful. They were driven by lust and evil desires. Their sin had reached a point where God could no longer ignore it. The angels sent by God were witnesses to this wickedness. They saw the darkness in the hearts of the men of Sodom. The angels confirmed that the city deserved God's judgment. Lot's attempt to protect his guests was a small light in a dark place. He was a righteous man living in a wicked city, but even his presence could not save Sodom. Section 4, Fire and Brimstone, God's Judgment Falls. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is one of the most dramatic and sobering tales in the Bible, illustrating the severe consequences of sin and disobedience. The next morning, the angels urged Lot to flee Sodom. They knew the time was short and the impending doom was near. They warned him that God was about to destroy the city. Lot hesitated. The weight of leaving behind everything he knew was heavy on his heart. He didn't want to leave. The memories, the life he had built, all seemed to anchor him to the doomed city. The angels took Lot, his wife, and his 2 daughters by the hand. They knew that hesitation could cost them their lives. They led them out of the city. The urgency in their steps mirrored the urgency of the situation. "Escape for your life," the angels warned. Their voices were filled with a mix of authority and desperation. "Do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain." The command was clear and absolute. "Escape to the mountains, lest you be destroyed." The mountains represented safety, a refuge from the impending wrath. Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah. The heavens unleashed their fury, and the cities were consumed. He overthrew those cities, all the plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. Nothing was spared from the divine judgment. The cities were completely destroyed. The once bustling streets were now silent, covered in ash and ruin. They became a symbol of God's judgment against sin, a stark reminder of the consequences of turning away from righteousness. Section 5. A look back, Lot's wife and her fate. Lot's wife disobeyed the angel's warning. She looked back at the city. Maybe she was curious. Maybe she regretted leaving. The Bible doesn't say why she looked back, but her disobedience had a terrible consequence. Lot's wife was turned into a pillar of salt. Her story serves as a warning. It reminds us to obey God's commands. We should not dwell on the past, especially when God has delivered us from danger. Lot and his daughters escaped to a cave in the mountains. They were safe from the destruction. God had spared them because of his mercy. Section 6. The aftermath, Lot and his daughters. Lot and his daughters were the only survivors from Sodom. The city had been destroyed by divine judgment, leaving behind nothing but ashes and ruins. They were afraid to go to the nearby cities. The fear of being recognized and possibly persecuted haunted them. They continued to live in the cave. The cave became their refuge, a place where they could hide from the world and its dangers. Lot's daughters were concerned about their lineage. They knew that without children, their family line would end with them. They wanted to have children. The desire to preserve their family name and heritage was strong. In a moment of desperation, Lot's daughters got him drunk. They slept with him. They each became pregnant. Their actions were driven by a mix of fear and determination. The older daughter had a son named Moab. She saw him as a new beginning, a hope for the future. He became the father of the Moabites. This tribe would grow and establish itself in the region. The younger daughter also had a son. She named him Ben-Ami. He was her pride and joy. He became the father of the Ammonites. This tribe too would carve out its place in history. The story of Lot's daughters is a tragic one. It is a tale of survival, but also of moral compromise. It highlights the consequences of poor choices. Their actions, though understandable, led to complex and far-reaching repercussions. It also demonstrates the ripple effect of sin. One act can have consequences that extend far beyond the initial moment. The sins of Sodom continued to affect the lives of those who escaped. The legacy of that city's destruction lived on in the lives of Lot and his daughters.